Okay, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Another beautiful day. Well, there's quite a thunderstorm out there, so it's from the weather position, it's not that perfect. But good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Great that you're here for our very Trump-like session with the title "Make European Software Great Again." And my name is Christian Frey. I'm working at the Austrian Research Promotion Agency, and my co-host is Angelo Nuzzo, my colleague from FFG, and he will take care of the questions from the audience. So within the next 50 minutes, which is not a lot of time, so that's my greatest issue is timing, we have a great lineup of panelists to discuss why we are so keen on buying made in Austria products, made in Germany products, made in Switzerland products. But when it comes to using digital products and services, we seem to behave differently. And this hinders, of course, highly innovative European companies. So why is that? We want to have some answers to these questions. And I don't want to waste a lot of time. So I start with Alexander Schmidt, who is the CEO of Course Ticket. And Course Ticket, as a quite promising company, already some years on the market, is focusing on next generation learning platforms, combining efficient learning experience with e-commerce. And Alexander is a very experienced, mature entrepreneur. And just first question to you, Alex. Course Ticket is a very good example that we do have all the credentials here on site in Europe available. But what are the main reasons that prevents us from using them as widely as they deserve?
Thanks for the introduction, Christian. I will give a deep, or not a deep, a short preview, and I'll try to answer your question. As an EdTech company, we have deep insights from first-row perspective on how quickly industries must change and political institutions have to adapt technology, especially after COVID-19. And of course, Ticket, we specialize in bringing together, as you've mentioned, e-commerce and learning experience in so-called learning experience platforms or digital training marketplaces. However, I want to focus on governmental institutions in general now. I think we need to push government more into the direction of acting as a role model. Political institutions should lead by example and look for innovative local hidden champions and SMEs instead of too often taking the obvious safe way with a global player or giving the chance to a global player in public tenders or public offerings. Most of the time, US-based companies, but these companies can also fail. On the other hand, many public tenders are managed by external consultants. Worth mentioning, I mean, everyone knows them, Deloitte, McKinsey, Accenture. These tenders often contain very specific requirements that can only be fulfilled by the largest software providers on the market. However, this way of pre-selection usually leaves no room for good local European software providers or vendors to participate or even pitch in these public offerings. This is my opinion. So why not involve software providers in the public offering processes already in advance instead of listening to international business consultants in general? As an example, or a good example, best practice example, I would not call it, but since 2018, we serve multiple ministries in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, for example, with our learning experience platforms in a strategic partnership with a local holding. And I mean, everyone can have his or her own thoughts about Saudi Arabian government, but in terms of software, they try to support national initiatives and companies to create more national economic wealth. And in my opinion, much more than we do it in Austria, at least. So it's obvious our ministries or the Chamber of Commerce too often put US companies first. I mean, maybe I can give you an example, but I think we don't have enough time.
Well, I think yes, it's good, and we can wrap it up in the later part during the Q&A and the discussion between the panelists. But what I understand from you is that it's not a fair competition actually between the big players and the small players. So what should be the defined next steps we together with you all can take to really equal out the conditions?
Mm-hmm. I mean, it seems to me that nowadays European technologies get most recognized if a huge investment took place. So the easiest way would be to give all innovative software companies a Series A funding, which is actually not possible. I think a good approach is building collectives, for example, edtech hubs, fintech hubs, etc., and try to share the knowledge and promote compatibility between different European software vendors or software tools. However, I mean, I know that this is not easy to achieve. I mean, including us, because usually we support with our platforms compatibility with the most commonly used software tools on the market, which leads most of the time back to United States-based companies. So finally, again, it's, I think, national and European governments and public fundings. Horizon 2020 is a good example, I think, which can push those collectives to progress into a direction which gives maybe more public attraction. Okay. And if I refer back, I think I need to come to an end.
Yes, that's correct.
If I refer back to the topic of education, again, COVID-19 forced us to digitize our schools and universities, and established solutions from local software companies would have been available. They were on the table. A leading secure chat and collaboration tool like Grape.io, founded in Austria, advanced live video streaming like Eyes On, founded in Graz.
Okay, so we have to come to an end. As I said, our issue is timing. But I think, as you said, the good software is around, and you also pointed out to Horizon Europe, or former Horizon 2020 framework program, and we'll come back to that with Hermann Hauser a little later on. Thanks very much for joining us now, Hermann. And now I think it's time to turn the page to another very loud voice in the European innovation scheme. Turn to Christian Pirkner. Christian Pirkner, CEO of BlueCode International, highly disruptive, award-winning company. Most of you will know the company, mobile payment solution connecting banks and merchants. So a real European alternative to the US solution dominating payment solutions. He was living in California, in Silicon Valley, led 2 startups to very successful exits. And I'm allowed to mention that BlueCode only received 20 million from the family office of SAP founder Dietmar Hopp only last week. I think the note was out last week. So Christian, thanks first of all for being here. And so we see, or we already experienced that in your case, BlueCode has the technology that can replace US and Chinese companies, even your technological one step ahead. Why is it not yet widely used, or as widely used as it deserves?
Thanks much, Christian, for the invite and for the kind words. And indeed, we're in a space, the payment space, which is, of course, governed by 6 companies. 4 of them from the United States, MasterCard, Visa, Diners, and Amex. They write the rules how money travels from A to B when you buy something in a store. The Chinese, smart enough, have their own system with UnionPay, and the Japanese do as well with JCB. We Europeans, 500 million of us, we do not have a rule book how to pay European. And that's quite stunning, right? It's the most frequent use case in all of our lives. Payment is the lifeblood of an economy, and we don't write the rules to this use case. It's also the most honest use case in all of our lives. Where your money goes is who you are. Doesn't matter what you tweet, like, share, etc. And so that's why you're right. In our space, we really have a tall order for all of us in Europe to see, do we want to play a role in this in the next few decades, or do we not? And yes, we built one solution. There's a few others in Europe. There's big words and plans all over the continent, from Brussels onwards to many of the countries, to see what such a plan B could look like. Mm-hmm. But in the payment space, it's a network issue, right? It's the chicken egg problem. If the merchants don't sign up for the solutions, then the user can't pay there. And if the banks in Europe don't bring out these solutions, then we won't get to the checking account. So it's a chicken egg problem. That means somebody's got to move. And that is either the merchants or the banks, at best, both in concert. Because once you get over a tipping point, then truly European stuff delivers. I mean, you see that in Sweden with Swish, you see it in Switzerland with Twint, you see it in Denmark with Mobile Pay. But these are all domestic solutions, and it will be quite tricky to have a European framework to make that work. So all in all, yeah, same as Alexander probably. The software is there, the platforms are there. Now it's a question: do we want to play or do we want to watch?
Especially in that area, in the fintech area, financial area, I see two things here. On the one hand, we are quite risk averse, as you and Alexander pointed it out. But on the other hand, I mean, the risk is as obvious as it can be, that we are really getting overdriven by all the others. And just imagine the payment costs are going up by the US or steered by the US. What happens then? So that's the reason I can't answer for myself. So how do you see that point?
It's always a question of the short, mid, and long term. If you're a company today, a bank, and you need to deliver a great product to your customers, let's face it, a MasterCard product is great and Apple Pay is awesome. So if your task is to fulfill what you have to do to your shareholders, to your team that works for it, for your customers, the solutions come up from the US are great. So check. Now the question is, how much airtime, how much energy, how much strategic foresight do you want to spend on creating and helping co-create a European way to do this? That's all just a question of management. Okay. If you feel that the short term is just to deliver on my numbers, on my traction, on my growth, then you're totally fine issuing the cards, because again, they're perfect, and signing up with Google and Apple Pay and all the rest of them, there's no fault to it. So again, it's more of a visionary thing. Do you feel you're part of Europe and you have a role in shaping how your kids will pay? Or do you not feel that way? And there's no right or wrong. So I don't want to say it's black and white. Some folks we meet at banks say, it's unlikely that we can pull this off in Europe, but we have to. And I'll do my part. And I have X 100,000, X million users. I'll sign up. I'll explain it to them. At the end, it's always the decision of the individual. You can't force anything, and you shouldn't. The better product should win. But the question is, do you offer it? Do you or not? And that is more of a management issue. The reason we all use the phone the way we use it is not Apple. It's Steve Jobs. The reason you drive an electric car is not Tesla. It's Elon Musk. The reason you search the web is not Google. It's Sergey Brin. The reason the Chinese use Alipay is not Alipay. It's Jack Ma. So usually it's people who disrupt the space, not companies. Okay. And you see that in every European country that I mentioned, Switzerland, Sweden, there's a few key senior executives who say, I'm going to do this now. Everybody follow. And if we do find that in the big regions, in Germany, in France, in Spain, in Italy, it doesn't take a lot of people, but it needs this type of caliber and leadership to say, let's roll. And that is quite rare in Europe. But
Christian, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Before you get even deeper, thanks a lot for this intro statement. And now working in a very similar field is Georg Hauer. He's general manager for the DACH region and Northern Europe for the N26 group. I mean, we know them, one of the most widely public fintechs. He's responsible for the business in 15 countries, including the home market, Germany and Austria. And he's also managing director, and we're very proud of that, of the tech hub of N26 in Vienna. Before that, before joining N26, George was general manager at Uber, so quite a lot of experience in that field. And by the way, it was founded by Austrians. Now it's in Berlin based, but nevertheless, make it great in Vienna also. So, Georg, it seems N26 succeeded, widely accepted as a European fintech. How come?
Yes, you mentioned it before. N26 was founded by two Austrians in Berlin, but what made us different is that we always had a very global audience in mind. Banking is a global need that can be addressed on a global stage. The one thing that we really truly did differently than other banks was, instead of just digitizing existing banking processes, which typically essentially means you bring the old bank forms, paper forms, to the digital screen, we wanted to rebuild banking from scratch. And what's exciting about it is that a lot of European politicians talk about, we need European Google, we need a German Amazon, we need not French Netflix. The reality is that it's very unlikely to happen because some of the biggest players in the world have already established themselves, and in many industries, especially social media, it's a winner takes it all market. The one industry where Europe is actually leading on has brought to life some of the world leader in innovation is fintech and banking. And so the question shouldn't necessarily be, how do we create a German Google, but rather, how do we create world market leaders on the global stage in certain industries? And fintech and banking might be exactly one of them.
Okay, so thanks a lot, and thanks a lot for this intro statement. What Christian said now is to come up with certain personalities, people that really offer that kind of dream and vision to make it happen also in Europe. So what about this statement?
So I think it's a very interesting statement, because I absolutely agree that it's people who make a change. It's not a company that brings change to an industry, but it's people behind it. Where I would disagree is that it doesn't have to be necessarily people that are very publicly known. And probably, Christian, that is not what you meant actually. But when we think of Steve Jobs and other really like big names out there, so in many companies, it's actually those people in the background that truly bring change to companies and to an industry without us ever knowing about it. But they're equally as important, because people that have a strong passion to change something and to bring value to their customers, those are truly the people that bring innovation, ultimately. It's not people who are trying to preserve the status quo. It's all about change and trying to increase and improve what we have today.
So is this also the way forward to compete on a global level for N26 within the next years?
Yeah. So N26 strategy can be described in 3 stages. The first one was focused on customers, where we really just focused on building the best banking app out there. The second one was on geographic expansion. We first expanded to 24 European countries. We launched as the first challenger bank in the US and set our first pilot test in Brazil. Now, the next stage is really about expanding our business model. We've already expanded and we first launched our first product in the insurance business. And so we're expanding from just banking into insurances. We've already announced that we're going to launch an investment trading platform. So, and in order to achieve that, we are planning to hire more than 1,000 new team members in the next 12 months. And we are particularly going to expand also our offices in Vienna and New York. And what's exciting about it is that the team in Vienna, so we currently have close to 50 people in Vienna. We plan on having 300 rather sooner than later. And this team is building global products. So they're not building products for the Austrian or the German speaking market, but we're building products that are used by millions of customers globally. And that includes the US. And that is one of these ways how we can bring change, how we can bring innovation to an industry that is a global industry, but it is innovation made in Europe.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Georg, for the time being. Now I would like to introduce Irene Vierka. She's the CEO of Inits, and she's worked with startups since ages. not in terms of age, but since 2004. That's quite a long time. And she's since 2012. She's the CEO of Inits, this high-tech incubator, who was voted one of the top 20 university business incubators worldwide. And I mean, that being based in Vienna is, I think, a very, very well done and highly achieved thing. So a track record is immense. Context Flow, Fluid Time, bought by Kapsch, Kiwi Security, GeneTech now, MySugar, now Roche, etc., etc. Spock, Thinkers AI. So very, very well-known names, not only in Austria, but even abroad now. So, and having heard Alexander, Christian, Georg, Irene, is European technology in a way, and I know that's a very strange question, worth less than technology from abroad in our minds?
That's a very good question, and there is a lot being said already. What we see supporting research and development intense startups at the very early stage is that they are interesting to investors because there is still a higher value that the early stage investors can get in an exit scenario. So I believe that many investors, and not only Austrian investors, have started to look into Austria, into Europe. It's not an Austrian thing, and invest at the early stage because the multiple they can earn is higher, might be higher. And we have proven that. The quality of the solutions is there. There is smart people everywhere, not only in Silicon Valley. There are smart people in Europe. The quality is not the issue. And we have heard it kind of already. I would like to phrase it in a little bit of a different way. Maybe what European founders still need to learn more is think bigger. And I feel I've started to work at Inits in 2004. One of the startups that was in our incubator in that very early stage was, back then it was called Smart Innovation Systems, Information Systems, sorry. And they organized a semantic web conference back then in Vienna, where I first met Hermann Hauser. Today they are called Suvu. It's a company that has customers like Microsoft. So obviously the technology is there, the talent is there. What we still are working on, I would say, is how do these talented people really get early stage funding and scale fast from the beginning. But we also need to work on is that thinking big, that thinking global right from the beginning. We need many solutions also that want to conquer the German-speaking market or maybe even Europe. But that global thinking that we heard before, that we want to really conquer the world, that's something I think that's a little bit in our culture that we still need to work on. And that's something that doesn't change very fast, I'm afraid.
Okay. So in terms of what Alexander said at the beginning, in terms of those regulatory problems and so on, would you agree with that? Is this also from your point of view a big issue, or is it rather getting enough talents like Georg, for example, pointed out? If we need 300 highly skilled people in Vienna, do we have those people around?
Yeah, this is two different questions. One is
I know.
The buyer side, and I would expand it from the public buyers, which can be very huge contracts for startups. There is one example, and in fact, the innovative public procurement process that is existing in Austria. It's called Innovative Öffentliche Beschaffung. They have a focus on how can they support startups at their early stage. They even offer startups public partners for prototype development. So early for further development, first pilot projects, etc. So that's been recognized in the European market already as one of the good practice models. We can always get better. But I would like to expand it to buyers who are corporates and other existing players. What we see is that most of our solutions that are being developed and are really, world-class solutions in their respective domains, they are first being bought by foreigners. They are not being bought first by Austrians. They are being bought by European customers. They go global. That's also the reason why export is, really an important. They are better in export than any other company in the very same industry. And I think also that those buyers are lacking a little bit of an openness for solutions that come from the outside. This is this open innovation mindset. We still have a little bit too dense the kind of not invented here syndrome. And I think that's something that we can also work on. Yeah, those big companies in Europe, they should also buy from startups, not only the public buyers.
Okay, thanks very much, Irene, for the first round. We will get back to the stuffing issue in the next round. Now it's time to perhaps move the angle a little, and I would like, first of all, thanks Christian Clerici for being here, because he's a very good example how to bridge the gap between being an international TV and show host on the one side and a successful entrepreneur on the other side. And he holds shares in Course Ticket. He's VP for content and creation at Vibe Moves You, a mobile company expert for digital mobility transformation, as he called it himself. So thanks for being here, Christian. And I mean, you created content all your life. What can that teach us, or what can we learn from you and your experience in that area to the basic questions? How should software look and feel to make it even more successful out of the European borders? You have to unmute you, Christian.
Here we go. Thank you very much for having me here. The only storytelling professional in this round is not even able to use the digital technique to get himself hearable. But this is the faith of creative people. We just think in pictures and we don't use too many digital tools in reality. No, honestly, thank you very much for having me here. I hope I can contribute a little bit to this illustrious round. Let's say content is something which is very unique, and Europe has a very unique way of telling stories, which is something I would like to point out a lot more in international context. Let's focus on what we do with Vibe, which is a company that develops own software on one hand side, and we use external software to do a very unique customer journey to get people into electromobility. What we do is car subscriptions only for electromobility. We have all brands, all models, everything. So our task actually is to tell the European mobility transition story and not relating or relying on what we hear from outside, what is coming from Asia, what is already established from the States. We already talked today about the fact that electromobility is nothing that is implemented by Tesla. It's something that Elon Musk brought to us. So what is the European story of electromobility? And this is something we try to tell as a story. We as European have a lot of resources which do not exist on the rest of the world. I'm not talking about the pure culture. I'm talking about social systems. I'm talking about sustainability issues. And this is something we can also put in a digital journey, which is the customer journey to bring people into the transition. We are facing the biggest disruption in the mobility field since 125 years. So it's crucial. What is the European story in terms of how do we bring people into this new technology? The technology itself is not rocket science. An electric car is more a computer on wheels. It's more a software-based thing on wheels. So what the European in car manufacturers have to learn, it's not a race in terms of do we build the better mechanical things. It's a question of software. And we have a lack in that area because the European car manufacturers, in a way, were busy the last 10 years with telling the world how Tesla will fail, instead of focusing on what are our assets to keep up with that transition. Now we experience an extraordinary movement in terms of mobility transition. It's exponential. We see it with our customers. So to bring it to the point, my interest is to tell the European story and use European software and digital tools to take the people onto this journey, which is a question of content and, of course, a question of the digital customer experience we try to do with Vibe.
So this means, in a way, this underlines what Christian from BlueCode said, that we have to have this kind of vision and tell the story. And I'm glad that you're here, actually, because someone who always told stories to the public is very much keen to tell us that. So this is the first part, and I think when we did the preparations to the session, you pointed out one thing, that what we have is this cultural, social background that we have in Europe. To what extent does this count in the discussion we are leading right now?
I think we have a different way of working with data. European people have a completely different mindset when it comes to who you are, what are you going to tell us about you, and what are we going to do with it. So the big discussion is, what kind of data do we give to companies that are working in a completely new field like electromobility? And I think this is a very, very interesting strength we have in Europe, because now what we do is we are collecting data about where do people charge their cars, how long do they charge their cars, where do they go from there, what kind of moving profiles do they have. And now we have to think, if people are not used to giving that data away just for free, because they are afraid that foreign companies, international companies are doing things with that, we as European companies have to point out that this will be something we can use as an advantage in the market, because we have one of the most powerful car industries on the planet. So every data which is collected now also by companies like us, because we bring the cars to the people and we have all the brands in our portfolio. So it's not that we have to rely on just what BMW says or Mercedes says. It's our own data we create by just looking how people accept the new technology. And this is something I think we can use as an advantage if we start doing it as a, how to explain, a story. I mean, if I tell my customer, it's valuable what I learn from you, how you use an electric car, and if you share that with me, I can start to create programs to give something of that information back to you. So I think we have a very unique European chance to develop systems and analyzing tools to get our own market as a bastion against the international market. That might be a little idealistic or visionary, but I'm pretty sure that with the assets we have, culture-wise, sustainability-wise, there's not so many countries in the world that can keep up with us to implement all that in a daily business. I mean, Austria, for example, is a role model in whole Europe in terms of sustainability. So if we try to check out how people use the energy that flows in their cars and how people start to create their own moving profiles with their electric cars, this is a very big asset to our company. And this is a very big asset which we can bi-directional communicate to manufacturers, because they are dependable on data we create, not only data that the cars themselves create. So I think a unique big European chance, which again is something we have to point out and tell stories and take the people with us on that journey.
Okay, Christian, thanks very much. I think it all comes back to the story and really be a little more on the scene. So this brings me to a very highly successful man and a very with a big success story, Hermann Hauser, currently in New Zealand, I think, and we would like to be where the background is. I think it's dark already by the time now in New Zealand. Thanks a lot for being here. I don't want to introduce you too much. Co-founder of Amadeus Capital Partners, serial entrepreneur, founded Acorn Computers, was research president at Olivetti, and what perhaps some of you don't know, he is one of the godfathers of the European Innovation Council. He was chair of the advisory group. Now he's co-chair of the advisory group for the European Innovation Council and a great supporter of this truly European idea. Hermann, perhaps you can elaborate a little on what the EIC is and what can it do to make European high-end products or deep tech products better accepted? I just want to point out that BlueCode was one of the companies who was already successful during the EIC predecessor program. So Hermann, thanks for being here, and floor is yours.
So I think I'd like to start with setting the bigger scene of why the European Innovation Council is such an important component of what we're trying to do in Europe to help deep technology companies. Well, the problem, I think, is well known. America has 5 times the amount of venture capital that Europe has. China has such amazing government support for deep tech that Europe is really lagging behind just in the firepower that we can deploy for our deep tech companies. It is interesting to note, and not many people know this, that Europe actually produces more startups than the US. So we actually do not have a university problem. Our universities are just as good as American or Chinese universities. We don't have a startup problem. We've got more than the US. We've got a scale-up problem. So the problem is that the startups that we do create with the excellent people that come out of our universities just don't get the funding that they need to become global companies very quickly. So the problem starts at the sort of $20 to $100 million range, where we've got a real gap. And that's where the EIC, with its 10 billion euro fund, can make a real difference. So we have 2 projects within the 10 billion euros, which is 10 billion euros over the 7-year period starting this year until 2027. There is the Pathfinder program, which is a grant program. And then there is the Accelerator program, which is really the great innovation. It's the first time that the EU is directly investing in deep technology companies, up to 15 million euros. I made sure that one of the rules is that we do not crowd out the market, but crowd in the market by the following rule, that the 15 million or up to 15 million equity investment that we can make in deep technology companies needs to be matched by the market. So we can, the majority of the money always has to come from the market, so that we help the venture capital industry in Europe and crowd them in rather than crowd them out. We can sweeten the deal by giving grants as well as equities. We've got the freedom of providing up to 2.5 million euros in grants for particularly deserving projects that otherwise might not get off the ground because they're too risky. So I'm really very excited about the EIC. It's a very innovative program. We've already made 160 investments. We're going to deploy about 1.5 billion euros a year. So we're by far the biggest deep tech fund in Europe. And I'm really looking forward to this moving the needle for Europe.
Thanks very much for this first statement. And do we already see the first results from the EIC? So what's your opinion? How long will it take until the first unicorns come up from this scheme, from this truly European scheme?
Well, of course, the EU has produced many unicorns already. It's just that this time we've got an extra lever, we've got an extra opportunity to help unicorns grow faster, which is this equity investment. And when I was the chairman of the advisory board, I listened very carefully to Helge Novotny, actually an Austrian who was the leader of the European Research Council. And the European Research Council is arguably one of the greatest success stories in Europe, because every big university will tell you about the number of ERC grants they have as a sign for the quality of their university. Even very, very humble universities like Cambridge University will do that. So, this is a real accolade for the ERC. And the reason Helge told me why it has been so successful is the simplicity of the rules, which are basically just two rules. The rule number one is that every PI, every principal investigator in Europe at any European university can make a proposal. And rule number two is the only selection criterion is excellence. And I took note of Helge's words and introduced exactly the same two rules for the EIC. The only criterion for making an application to the EIC is that you're a European deep tech company. So any deep tech company in Europe can make an application to the EIC, and the only selection criterion is excellence. So I very much hope that this will lead to, in the same way that the ERC produced lots of Nobel laureates, we hope to produce lots of unicorns.
That's a very good statement. We take that, and now I would like to switch to Angelo. Do we have some questions to the panelists?
Yes, hi. Also from my side, I was monitoring actually our Slido where people are posting their questions. I would say we have 5 minutes, right, for two hot topics. I will try to group the question in these topics. One is about the big thinking, which drives quite the most questions. I will try to summarize the question. It's about, in the Silicon Valley, there is a tight and firm network, and they are largely funded by a lot of VC and public funds. While for EU SMEs, there are alliances, this lobbying, which is pretty inaccessible to join, to roll them worldwide. So, the question about this, can you comment on this aspect? Why it's in the States, there is a kind of environment which works more in this sense to help you thinking big. While in Europe, it seems there is a barrier for small companies to enter the right lobby. This is the sense of the question. And the second, then maybe we don't have so much time, is about the banking and insurance system. The comment is that they are built on very old system, legacy system in Europe. And well, this is not a problem to have this innovative approach to the fintech.
Okay, well, thanks very much, Angelo. It's two interesting questions. I think everyone could address those questions. Perhaps the one on the US market and the difference to European. Perhaps Christian Pirkner and Irene. Perhaps you can elaborate a little. Ladies first. Christian first. I don't know.
Then I'll take it.
Yes, thanks very much, Irene.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Yes, I think that's true. In Europe, I think we still are in the culture of separation, more national thinking than really European thinking. And this goes down to the family, the company, and the community. We are more siloing than opening. I think this is also what I wanted to say. This kind of, there's somebody strange. We don't know the person. We don't know the solution. We don't know the technology. Let's check out what we do with it. What can we do ourselves? And it is this openness, I think, would be one of the driving forces. That's one thing. The other thing, I think also, we are heroes if it comes to skiing. We are not yet heroes, or we do not yet have enough heroes if it comes to entrepreneurship and startup and global thinking and global growth. And I think we are slowly getting there. We have our first unicorns now in Europe, and I think we will catch up. The question is really, are we fast enough? And the others, they are even faster, maybe. Maybe also one figure, most of the entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley are not United States citizens. They are foreigners that bring the solution and the entrepreneurial thinking, so to speak, into the country. And the question is, what can we do in Europe to keep them back in our own ecosystem, to have them grow from here and not somewhere else?
Thanks very much, Irene. I think you pointed it out. We are lacking heroes in a way, but at least we have 6 of you here today on stage. One being Christian Pirkner. You lived abroad. Now you live in Switzerland / Austria. Can you support what Irene said? Is it in a way different, or what's?
Can fully support it. When I lived in San Francisco, 1999, that was the beginning where the music industry imploded with Napster and Sean Fanning. And the spirit in the cafes, the spirit in the whole area was not solve a problem. The spirit was change the world. And that spirit just makes all the difference, because it means when you go in Palo Alto, Sand Hill Road, when you talk to the VCs, you're not solving a digital music problem. How could you change how people experience this all over the planet? And the same thing that happened just a few years later when in the digital video industry, the Netflix guys were one of my customers in my second startup. The problem was not to solve streaming with more pixels. It was to change how we interact with media all across the world. And so that DNA and that fabric is very much there in California, at least some parts in Texas and New York, etc. But yeah, that's a cultural phenomenon. In Europe, we are more folks who solve problems, and we're proud we solve them. But there's not too many yet who say, you know what, this problem solves how we do this in general all across the planet. And that is, but I agree with you. It's coming. It's a cultural thing. You have to see this a few times over. What Georg and his team, Valentin and Max, are doing. I mean, who would have thought, right? There's a company now reinventing how you experience banking and hopping over to Brazil. This is not an easy market. But and let's see if it works.
Sorry. There are 2 minutes left, and okay, I think we come back to the stories, and I think that what also Hermann told us. But I would like to use those 2 minutes for Georg and for the last question concerning fintechs and the legacy that the big banking companies will perhaps never overcome. What's your point on this question?
Yes, so it's a great question, because indeed the banking insurance industry is probably among the most legacy-driven and most boring industries out there. But the truth is, that's exactly the reason why the opportunity is so massive. Because the human behavior is very slow, and especially if you want to change human behavior, and changing the way we do banking is essentially changing a behavior. In order to do that, the opportunity and the reason for change has to be massive. What's exciting about the industry in banking is not only that the IT and the technology is such legacy and really old-fashioned business model or IT structure, but it's also the mindset of banks in general. How they build products is really legacy-based and old-fashioned. And that's it's one of the biggest opportunities out there at this point. And the reason why N26 became so successful is because from Amazon, that started in 1997 and started selling books, for almost 20 years, no one thought about how to digitize banking because it was just so hard. But the opportunity is massive, and I feel that people and companies should focus on the biggest and hardest opportunity out there.
Okay, thanks very much. And I think I would like to ask Herman from the other side of the world for the final statement. It was really a pleasure talking to you, having you on stage here. It's really a shame that we don't have more time, because we could have go on for hours and it would stay interesting. Herman, your final thoughts. You're still muted.
There is a lot of lamentation going on, which is one of our diseases in Europe. But on this panel, Christian or Georg, just two people who have shown that we can do these things in Europe. When I first went to Silicon Valley and worked with Kleiner Perkins on a deal a long time ago, they were bragging that they had produced 9 unicorns. I thought, Jesus, this is something that we'll never be able to do. Well, we've got 15 unicorns in Cambridge now. Only 7 had anything to do with me, and 2 out of those 7 are decacorns. So, we can actually do this in Europe. It's just taking a little longer, but all the things are pointing in the right direction. So sometimes we just have to stop beating ourselves up and look at how much progress we've actually made, especially over the last 10 years.
We will take that as the perfect final sentence to this session. So thanks a lot to everyone out there. Thanks a lot to our panelists, and have a good day. Bye-bye. Thank you very much.